Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode of Aurora Tutorials Ground Forces. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at boarding combat, boarding designs, and boarding vessels as a whole. This will be a kind of rough summary and give you an idea in action of what happens when you board an enemy ship, the consequences of both doing that and the aftermath, and what you want to be thinking about before you get to that point in general. So, boarding enemy vessels. To be clear, the first things that you need to know, you can only board with infantry. Enemies can fight you back when you board their ship, of course. They are defended by the crew members of that ship, and if they have troop transports or they're carrying any troops on them, ground forces, then they will also fight you as well. Not all your forces will survive making the breach into the ship, though you can get pretty much all of them survived if you do the correct things, which we'll go over in a bit. And generally speaking, boarding is a very difficult process, and you need to be at quite short ranges to accomplish it, and it's relatively risky, and but it can be extremely high reward, because if you capture that ship, you can scrap it, you can reverse engineer it, or you could use it yourself. So we're gonna have a look at the design I just made here. We have the boarding team. It's 250 tons, it has 21 elements in it, and we are using Space Marines. Now, essentially, because you are restricted to only using infantry, you want to use, ideally, as powerful infantry as you can get. This is using as best tech as possible, outside of the racial arm and weapon strength, to create these designs. So, I've selected infantry, I've hit crew served anti-personnel. This is like a machine gun almost, and this is the most space efficient to number of shots. When you're facing a primarily enemy that is made up of crew, and crew for reference are infantry that are light personnel weapons with light infantry armor. Crew anti-personnel works great because while it has low armor penetration and low damage, relatively speaking, it is very effective when it comes to killing lots and lots of relatively lightly armored infantry. So I've selected that. Second thing I've selected is heavy powered infantry armor. This is the most advanced infantry armor you can get, and this provides a 2x multiplier to your armor strength. Obviously, the higher armor you have, the less chance of those crewmen actually doing any damage to you, and since you can only fit a few guys actually boarding the enemy, realistically speaking, and you can only fit infantry, you want your infantry to be as powerful as possible. Of course, you could scale stuff much higher. I'm just going to be using a 250 ton formation for this tutorial to show stuff off. Next, we're going to have a look at advanced genetic enhancements. These, again, like armor, but they provide buffs to your health. So we're using advanced genetic enhancements, which is the most powerful genetic enhancements possible. For reference, you can go ahead and research them by going to biology and genetics. You can go to genome sequence research, and then you'll be given the 3 tiers of genetic enhancement, which you can apply to infantry. It's not cheap at all. And then for the other ground stuff, it's all in the ground combat research. So we're doing that for the same reason. Again, we're trying to make our Space Marines, we're trying to make our Spartans, our ODSTs, those kind of things, who are going to be able to do this highly delicate task. The next thing, we have boarding combat capability. So how boarding works, essentially, is when you attempt to board a ship with another ship, depending on the relative speed between the two vessels that are both attempting to be boarding and is being boarded, you will lose a certain number of boarders on trying to breach. So if you're going about the same speed as the enemy, you are going to take significant casualties trying to board that vessel. If you are going 10 times the speed of the enemy, you will take no casualties. But what boarding does is it means you only need to be 5 times as fast. So it reduces the casualties that you will take, and so that's a big help and improvement. We've also added a headquarters here. This is because that does actually provide benefit with assigning a commander, and that can provide significant assistance in terms of actually doing damage because he provides his commander bonuses. And you'll notice that I've not added any logistics, and that's because unlike any other combat, any ground combat, boarding combat does not last 8 hours. Instead, it lasts, if I remember my math correctly, it'll be 30 seconds, though we'll see that in just a bit. It's probably more than that, but for now, 30 seconds. when we get to the actual boarding operation, you can see the exact time. The point is it's way too short of a time for logistics to actually be important, because inherently they'll already have 3.3 days worth of logistics, and that's going to be way too long for them to actually care at all in the actual operation of boarding an enemy vessel. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to have a look at the design I built for our ship here. So we've got a boarding vessel, Tarnis class, and this is a fighter-sized vessel, very, very basic, with a boarding-capable troop transport. You need this to actually board with anything. You don't need boarding combat capability with the ground force, but you need boarding bays to actually board an enemy ship. So that's a very important notion. I have an engine, which is boosted as fast as possible. Again, we want to get as fast speed as we can. Relatively short range. Most people would probably deploy these from carriers, for example. Boarding crafts, things like that. Some people would think of them as boarding torpedoes, fired very quickly and single return. Because likely, if you're boarding an enemy ship that is functional in any real degree, after you board the enemy ship in that increment, they will blow it out the sky. They'll blow the boarding vessel out the sky. So people like to think of that as torpedoes. I have a sense here, you don't really need this. I'm just doing this because I need it for the tutorial, so we can actually see the enemy ships. And we've got our ground forces boarding team assigned up. Not a design I recommend you actually doing. I'd recommend doing some more optimization, but this gives you an idea of the kind of size and idea you might go with in regards to boarding. Of course, you can scale things up as needed. You'll also obviously need to research boarding base separately. So right here, I have two vessels. I have two enemy vessels detected. These are from the Dasili aliens over at Mars. And we have our boarding vessel lying in wait here. One of these ships has no engine speed, and the other ship, one of these ships has a relatively small engine speed, about 10 times less. And one of these ships is about equal in terms of speed. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what happens to a boarding team when they attempt to board a ship that has a speed that is similar. But before I do that, I'm going to quickly, just so that we're good to go, we're going to go to priorities and MISC, and I'm just going to assign this up to give us another one, just because I want to make sure that we actually can see both, essentially. That's the idea. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to instant build, get that all done, play erase, and then we can just attach, and we're going to just go transport those over to, we're going to go ahead and move that over to this one. That'll take some time. There we go. Though they will need their transported items. We'll get to that in a bit. I think we don't really need to worry about that too much. We're just going to kind of show off what's going to happen. So, contacts. We are going to attempt to board the larger one, or the smaller one, which is a little bit faster. We're going to attempt boarding all actions. Again, I'd recommend probably only boarding if you're okay with losses, one. If you're okay with losses, and two, if the enemy ship's been disabled. Then boarding's really good. Boarding's also great if you're against a superior enemy. So here we go. We are going to move in and attempt the boarding action here. Attempt boarding all formations. So approaching the enemy vessels. And we are 30 seconds here. So as soon as that boards, you see here, look, everyone died, but the single one guy on the Space Marine side. So we just attempted to board, but because of their relative speed to us, that boarding attempt went absolutely horribly. We lost 20 out of 21 people, and that's not good at all. Now, what thing we can do is, because that guy did survive, we can see here that the first boarding team is not able to gain access, as the target's armor has not yet been penetrated. A breaching charge has been detonated, and further updates will follow. Basically, when you land the boarding team on the vessel, if the armor has not already got a hole in it, they will attempt to breach through the armor. So they will go through each layer of armor, and that will take a certain amount of time. And the enemy can't interrupt this process, and eventually you'll breach in. So once those Marines are on that ship, they will get in eventually. And we'll see how long that will take. There we go. We've successfully penetrated the hull. And now combat will follow, which is every 60 seconds, to be clear. And so one guy is slowly making his way. He kills one crewman, and he is going to continue his rampage, but he unfortunately did die. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get ourselves another boarding team ready to go. And we're going to go ahead and board the other vessel and show you the exact difference with what occurs there. So I'm going to go ahead and order this. We're going to go ahead and load ground unit. We're going to load that boarding team, and we're going to transport that over to the larger vessel. Again, you want these ships to be as fast as possible to have the biggest chance of actually managing to board. So here comes the next wave with a 250-ton unit in tow. So 30 seconds. And we complete boarding, and we took no casualties doing it at all. So there you go. That gives you an idea of really the potential casualties on the way in. Disable the enemy ship or be super, super fast. Make sure your boarding combat capability can get on that ship pretty quickly. Now we will attempt to breach. We detonated a charge, and we've successfully penetrated the hull. We will now begin the combat rounds as we can see them. So, 60 seconds. We killed 12 crewmen here. We took 14 hits. We lost 1 marine in that engagement. But we killed 12. So currently we're trading 1 to 12 right now. We killed another 12, and we didn't lose anyone doing it. That is because the enemy does not have the penetrative capability to really damage us. So there, think about that using stub guns against Space Marines. Doesn't really work out too well. We did end up losing 1 more Space Marine, but we are trading very efficiently, and we're slowly chewing through all of these infantry, and we managed to board and capture the vessel after killing about 75 crew members. Once that vessel has been boarded, it will become part of our naval fleet, and you'll be able to see it here. It will get the designation O01 status, which indicates that it has been boarded and requires work to actually bring up to station, and will need its crew replenished, replacement crew, to actually be useful. So right now, it's really not very useful to us. That is the one negative, of course, of boarding, is this kind of simulates that the enemy has sabotaged the systems, locked down the bridge, and you don't really have an easy way to get it back up and running. Now, you can obviously tug this ship with a tractor beam back to port, get it replaced crew, get it repaired, all that kind of thing, because as we should be able to see here, you can see where we breached into the hull here. So that can be some damage. And but we do gain control of this ship, and you can see the design of the enemy vessel. Now, if you would like to pick up the enemy ship, if we go here, we can load ground unit from stationary fleet, and we can pick them back up in the shuttle if the shuttle did survive, so that you don't lose those boarding team crew members. That is basically the essence of boarding. Of course, you can do boarding with much less sophisticated technology, without genetic enhancements, without the other stuff. You kind of brute force it. You can also not like focus. You don't like it. It's not really something you have to focus on at the end of the day. And if you want to do it, there are risks involved. I don't recommend it during active combat. If you do it during active combat, send lots of them and make them fast, and do it within close range. Basically, when you order a ship to move, let's say deploy from a carrier, then move. If it's within 5 seconds, it will deploy those Marines within those 5 seconds before it blows up, and then it would blow up if it gets detected. So if you're doing it against an enemy ship that you're actively next to, if you can board within that 5-second increment, you will be able to get them deployed into there without that risk. So they can be a really useful way of doing things, but always consider other options. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have a look. We're going to go to one of my games here. And a lot of people talked about ship security detachments and boarding. So I do this both for RP and for other reasons. If we go to ships here, you can see here that the TSV Guardian, ships, TSV Guardian here has the 1st Marine detachment installed on board, which is 48 riflemen and a Marine captain who are assigned to security. These forces, like I talked to at the beginning of the video, will protect the ship themselves, against any boarding actions. There are enemies who will board you. I'm not getting into too much detail as that can be spoilers, but suffice it to say, it's generally a good idea to have those marine detachments on board, both for an RP perspective, because I find it cool, and the second reason is to protect your ships against unwanted invaders, because let's just say a marine detachment is far stronger than the crewman on board and has a much better chance of actually surviving. Another thing to go over is that there's no when you board, there's no fortification. However, when the enemy is on the ship, they get some fortification. I think it's fortification 3. I will have to check. But the point is they get fortification, which means that they're harder to hit because it kind of represents that they've dug down into the ship. They're holding the hallways and the corridors. They've dug themselves in. They've built makeshift barricades and stuff, awaiting the enemy as they breach in. All right, this is a relatively quick video today. I want to just get this out of the way, get people understanding of what boarding combat is like. Hope it's been helpful in some regards. We both got to see what it was like when we boarded a ship that was about as fast as us, boarded a ship that wasn't as fast as us, the kind of design you might want to look at. That being highly advanced, high-cost elements in small designs with shuttles or torpedoes or any kind of abstract idea to fight, take them and board the enemy ship. And we kind of got some information about what that combat might look like, the fact it takes 60 seconds per increment to fight, and some of the more basics around logistics and commander bonuses and all that other good stuff. If you've enjoyed today's video, please like, comment, subscribe, and next video we'll be going back to the Starting Step series as we continue the rotation every single day between each series. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.